What's up, everybody? My name is Bimler, and today I'm going to be reviewing the new Sam LRC album, A Lonely Sinner. You might not have heard of this album. I hadn't until a little after it came out. And you might not have heard of Sam LRC, so who is she? What is this album? Sam LRC's been doing music for a couple of years now, but hasn't really gained any traction with anything until this album came out. It's actually been getting a little bit of steam, and I had been introduced to it by a friend. Now, why has this album been getting a lot of steam? If you go on rateyourmusic.com right now, it is one of the top albums of the year. So people are loving this thing when they actually do hear it. What makes this album so great? Well, when my friend introduced me to it, she told me that it has three main influences, albums that you might have heard of, and if not, I'm going to explain them to you. The first one being Javelin by Sufjan Stevens. The newest of the influences came out last year, and it's fantastic. I've heard the album. It's very folksy, but with swelling instrumentation, tragic lyrics, beautiful soundscapes. Just a phenomenal record overall. Another one of the influences is The Glow Part 2 by The Microphones, which you can definitely hear in this album's vocals, as well as its quieter, more folksy moments. I know I said Sufjan's album was also folksy, but The Glow influences much more on the sort of serene, quieter parts, as opposed to the grand, swelling ones, which are more Sufjan-inspired. The third influence, though, that really caught my interest is The Seer by Swans. This epic album, the one of the three that I hadn't heard, but still knew plenty about as I've been getting into Swans. It's just a long, dark, heavy, powerful, post-rock noise album. And I thought, how on God's green earth could any of these influences work together? Obviously, the two folk albums could work together, but The Seer? How do you mix post-rock, noise, epic, swelling, pounding, building, just riffs and song progressions with beautiful, quieter sounds, and actually make it work incredibly well? And this album answered my question. This album is phenomenal. I first listened to it here, actually, with said friend. It's actually not the same friend who showed me Nurture, by the way. Different friend. But I listened to it here, and I was immediately blown away. Right off the bat from track 2, Philautia, which features some amazing, subtle guitar work, great builds. This track swells, just gets very epic and grandiose towards the end, in terms of, like, power. This one's much more graceful to me, although it does have a bit more upbeatness towards the end of the track. For a bit more upbeatness, go to the next track, Sinner, which is a very similar track structurally, but features more heavy guitar riffs during the main leg of the song. I don't want to get too far into the album yet without telling you sort of what the songs are about as well. This album overall has the big overarching theme of parental trauma, and it executes it perfectly. A lot of the metaphors, which honestly, at face value, and it's kind of one of my few issues with the album, are kind of cliche and kind of, I don't know, corny, quirky. You can tell it's coming from a place here, and it hits really hard. And one of these big tracks where it really feels heavy is Sinner. The vocal performances on this album are pretty sparse, but when we do get them, they're usually delivering very heart-wrenching lyrics with a more subdued vocal sound, almost kind of sounding like a more effeminate Phil Evram of The Microphones. And to an extent, I'm not terribly sure how I feel about the vocals, but it definitely gives the album that sort of weak feeling. And honestly, I mean, calling an album's vocals weak sounding makes it seem like an insult, but here, with its themes of parental trauma and also a sort of like self-loathing and weak feeling, it perfectly works. And it perfectly accents the album's much more serene instrumental moments, like on the song Flowerfields, which is a much more piano-based light track for the majority of its runtime, and also features some of the most heart-wrenching lyrics on the whole album, such as, "I hope my blood will feed my flowers," which just, with the context of the rest of the song, is heartbreaking to hear. But then the song moves into the next track, Storge, which is the wildest track on the album. I do think it has probably the sloppiest sample work. It's probably my biggest complaint with the song. As much as the whole "I want to be a big strong wolf" thing does fit the album's aesthetic and meaning, it just feels kind of awkward and doesn't really fit the tone of the song. It feels almost too childish and cartoonish to really work with the intense atmosphere the song builds. However, when the song builds, it then proceeds to explode towards the end of its runtime with straight up chugging guitar riffs, pounding drums. This is the Swans influence right here. This is the Seer in full operation, and it is magnificent. The adrenaline that I got when I first heard this part of the song, I was blown away. I didn't expect the album to go in this direction, but it did, and it actually kind of nailed it. That's something I also want to touch on the album. The person who made this pisses me off, right? She's younger than me. This album, not only is it written amazingly, not only is it cohesive as hell, not only is it gorgeous, it's also produced really well. I don't understand how this is possible, and I don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I want to know what she's doing at this point. Because this album it just destroyed all of my expectations. At the heavier end of Storge, we end up transitioning into Sheep Theme, which is by far the most fun song on the album in terms of being upbeat, lively, having a bit more celebratory vocals and lyrics. The first proper refrain on the record, besides maybe the I'm a Sinner bit on Sinner. This one feels a lot more triumphant and aggressive than that one, though. And honestly, on the vocal refrain of the song, I'm kind of getting almost like DeathCon energy from the vocal delivery, in a good way. And it's really unique for the album. I didn't expect this. It kind of comes out of left field, and while that kind of thing would kind of normally throw me off, I think the build on Storge earns it, and I do think it's a welcome bit of diversity here, and kind of shows the album leading in a more hopeful and victorious direction. Which is perfectly elaborated on by the song 4M, which is an instrumental track. There are lyrics on Genius, but for the life of me, I can't hear them, so I don't know if they're even in the song. The song is supposedly written for Sam LRC's significant other, and the song is very sweet, pretty, hopeful sounding, and transitions into the closer, the beauty of the present moment, which is just another sort of serene fade out to the whole record. Sounds very gorgeous, very hopeful and lifelike almost. At the very end of the song, it kind of fades down and cuts out, and we hear a brief vocal from Sam saying something. I actually don't know what she says here. I kind of wish I did, because I feel like it probably is intentional with how the song randomly cuts off and sounds kind of dark at the end. In general, this album is remarkable. I went back to it after listening to it for the first time, and it nearly brought me to tears. It was so good. Not only is this album emotionally powerful, it's also well produced, gorgeous sounding, the song structures are amazing, and my two favorite songs are by far the two longest songs on the album. That's how you know it's good. Yeah, I'd give this thing an S. I highly implore you to listen to it if you haven't, but if you did somehow, leave a comment down below, subscribe if you want to see more, and hit the bell to see when that more comes out. And yeah, listen to the new Sam LRC album. It's really good. That's all for me. See you guys in the next one. Adios.